Israel's army said 6 rockets were fired along a town near the border of Lebanon. 3 crossed into Israel and were intercepted. To speak more on all of this, I do want to bring in Blaise Mishtal, who is the Vice President for Policy at JINSA. Blaise, as always, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us here on Live Now from Fox.
Good morning, Stephanie. Thanks for having me on.
So, we are talking about 2 very different ceasefires. One that has fallen apart between Israel and Hamas. Both sides not in agreement when it comes to what those next steps should be. Can you tell our viewers right now at this point where that ceasefire and the negotiations stand today and what it looks like when it comes to potentially moving forward?
Sure. Well, Israel has always been very clear about what its goals in the war are. And there's 2 main ones. First of all, to get the hostages back. And second of all, that Hamas cannot remain in control of Gaza. And the ceasefire that was negotiated together by the Biden administration and the incoming Trump administration in mid-January hopefully offered a path towards achieving both of those objectives. It allowed for hostages to be released and set up further negotiations towards a deal in which Hamas would be replaced in Gaza by some other entity that would help govern it. And what it turned out was Hamas was not interested in negotiating its own demise and its own replacement. In fact, it was intent on demonstrating to the world that it remained in control, that it had an iron grip on power in Gaza, and that it would use it cruelly. We only need to think back to the awful ceremonies that Gaza staged, releasing hostages while its masked fighters brandished guns in their faces and crowds jeered them. Hamas was in control, and it was not ready to negotiate any ceasing of its operations or hold on power there. And I think that's why negotiations towards a phase 2 of the deal never really materialized. And when the United States and Israel proposed, seemingly quite sensibly, that at the very least there could continue to be an exchange of hostages, some maintenance of the first phase of the ceasefire, Hamas was not interested because the hostages are its leverage, are what is allowing it to stay in power. And so that is why Israel decided if there are no hostages being released and there's no negotiations by Hamas towards removing itself from power, then there is no more ceasefire. And that the only way to gain leverage against Hamas, to force Hamas to release more hostages and relinquish its power, is to go back into Gaza. And that's what we've seen for the last week.
Hamas refusing to release those hostages, that was a non-starter for Israel. We have seen the activity ramp up back in Gaza. When we take a look at another potential ceasefire, it took months for the first phase of the ceasefire to actually come to fruition. Is that realistic? Hamas refusing to release those hostages, that is one of the sticking points with Israel. Could we see another ceasefire come to fruition, or right now does it look like the only way to address Hamas is through force?
It certainly seems like Hamas has not budged so far in the week of this renewed Israeli offensive into Gaza. It doesn't seem like there have been any negotiations or any sign of flexibility from Hamas. No intent to release these hostages. And I should note, 5 of those hostages are American citizens that Hamas still holds. This is not only a crime against Israel that Hamas has committed and has continued to perpetrate. It is a crime against the United States. And so I think what we're going to see, and we're already seeing, is Israel gearing up for a level of fighting, a level of pushing against Hamas that is greater even than anything we saw during the first war, when Israel was sort of slowly and meticulously moving through Gaza, sort of one town at a time. They're now gearing up. We see them coming from the north and the south at the same time, trying to put much greater military pressure on Hamas. But so far, it doesn't seem to be working, which I think leads to Israel's second objective, which is the elimination of Hamas. And I think that might be the only way that we're going to get these hostages back out.
And speaking of the elimination of Hamas, Israel decimated Hamas earlier on. When it comes to regrouping and reorganizing, obviously that's the objective of Hamas. They don't want to be eliminated. Where do they stand now? How strong are they at this point in time?
Yeah. So I think, we often call Hamas terrorists. It's important to understand that at least before the war, as of October 7th, they were what Israel called a terrorist army. They had organized units. They had special forces. They had rockets and missiles and drones on the level of most militaries in the Middle East. That military capability has largely been decimated. We saw this week that all that Hamas could muster in response to Israel was launching 3 rockets. It doesn't have a lot of that big military hardware left. But what it does have is fighters, and is now much more of a terrorist or a guerrilla force. And according to the Israelis, at least, even though they say they think they've killed maybe some 20,000 Hamas fighters, injured and taken off the battlefield, similar numbers, Hamas has recruited and replaced many of those with young men who have joined its ranks since the war started. They may not be as hardened, they may not be as well trained or armed as Hamas fighters before them, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to fight and they're not going to hit back at Israel. And that's now the challenge. They're not fighting an army. They're fighting lots of small guerrilla cells that are hidden among civilians. We know that Hamas hides in schools, mosques, and hospitals and fights from there.
I also want to speak about this because we haven't heard much about Hezbollah, but that is still happening. We're talking about Iran and the various arms. Hezbollah, of course, one of them, also fighting Israel. We've seen some of the attacks happening this weekend. Hezbollah not admitting to some of those rocket attacks that killed individuals. And there still is a ceasefire in place. Where does that ceasefire stand?
Yeah, so I think technically that ceasefire is still in place. Both sides still say that they are committed to respecting it, but it is certainly tenuous. It is certainly the case that whether it is Hezbollah or other terrorist groups that operate within Lebanon that are aligned with Hezbollah and operate only with Hezbollah's permission, terrorists remain in Lebanon. They remain committed to attacking Israel, and that the full terms of the ceasefire, which is, first of all, that Hezbollah would stop attacking Israel. Secondly, that they would withdraw north of the Litani River. And thirdly, that the Lebanese armed forces would control that territory to make sure that it is safe and that no further attacks from it come against Israel. The full terms of the ceasefire haven't been implemented, which is why Israel continues to defend itself by hitting against terrorist targets that remain in that area that is supposed to be safe, and why the United States thankfully recognizes Israel's right to do that, that as long as Hezbollah or other terrorists are there along the border, Israel has the right to defend itself while still maintaining that ceasefire. But I think the bigger point here, Stephanie, is that despite the ceasefires, despite what Israel has done to decimate Hamas and decimate Hezbollah, these Iran-backed groups are down, but they are not out. And that Iranian octopus, not just in Gaza, not just in Lebanon and Yemen as well. The Houthis fired on Israel this week at least twice. In Iraq, elsewhere in the region, continues to be active, continues to want to attack Israel, and continues to want to harm the United States as well. And that is the big threat here, is that this Iranian proxy network has not been taken down, that Iran remains a threat, which is also why we're seeing the United States launching strikes against the Houthis, in addition to what's happening in Gaza and Lebanon.
Blaise, we appreciate you taking the time to explain all of this to our viewers on this Sunday morning. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Stephanie. Always good to be with you.
Absolutely. And as Blaise